Okay, so now we're going to go over a couple of other problems that you may come across. And one of those problems is when you try to create one shape out of another. So in this case, let's say you have a client, and the client says that they want you to model a cube, and from that cube they want you to have a round cylindrical pipe that comes out of the side of the cube. So that would mean that you would need to have a square, cube-shaped object, and of course then you would actually have to model a round, or actually a perfectly round, cylindrical hole that's extruded from the side of the cube. And then somewhere in the middle of this cylindrical pipe, they want you to cut into it, and they want you to extrude another pipe coming out of the side, almost like a T-junction. So let's start out with a cube. Now we could start out with a cylinder, but it's just going to be easier to just start out with a cube. So we have the cube here, and I'm just going to pull that up just to get it up above the grid. And we want to come over here to the segments, and we want to give this 4 segments for each X, Y, and Z value. Okay, now let's just say that our client wants these corners to be rounded and beveled. So we can just use a hypernurb to accomplish that. So we'll drag the cube into the hypernurb. So we send that to the client, and the client says, well, that's a little too rounded. Okay, so we'll just go into the cube, make it editable, go into point mode, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the rectangle selection tool, and I'm going to turn off only select visible elements. And what we'll do is we'll go to a top view, and I want to select these 2 rows here. I'm going to grab the scale tool, and I'm just going to scale those up. Then I'm going to grab these 2 rows of points here, scale those in the X direction. And by doing that, you can see that it's tightening up the corners and the edges. So now we'll just go to a front view, and we need to select that row as well as this one. And then we'll just grab the scale tool again and scale those up in the Y direction. Alright, so now we show this to the client, and the client's really happy with it. And these corners are much sharper now, but you can see that they are still beveled. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to knock out this hole here in the side, and we're going to go in the plus X direction. So what we want to do is we want to create a round circular hole, and this hole has to be perfectly round. Otherwise, if it's not round and we go to extrude it outward, then this pipe that's going to be coming out of the side of this cube is going to look rather strange if it's not perfect. So instead of creating some type of reference spline and using the circle reference spline to line up the points and move everything into position, we can do this another way, which is going to be a little faster. So I want to go into polygon mode, and I want to select these 4 large polygons right here in the very center. And I want to delete them. Now I'm going to go over into edge mode, and I want to select the boundary edge that goes around this hole that we just created when we deleted those 4 polygons. So I'm going to use the loop selection, so that's UL on the keyboard. That will bring up the loop selection, but notice that it's not selecting around the hole. It's going around the entire cube, and we don't want that. So we need to come over to the attribute here called select boundary loop, and we'll turn that on. And now it will select that inside boundary loop of edges. So we'll click it to select it. And now we want to do what's called a 0 extrusion. So in order to do a 0 extrusion, we'll just right click and we'll choose the extrude tool, and we'll set the offset to 0. And then we'll hit apply. Now by doing this, what we've done is we've taken that selection of edges and we've extruded them. However, the offset value is set to 0, which means the extrusion did not move any. So now what we have is a selection of edges that are sitting directly in the same place as the original edges that we selected. So now what we can do is we can take this newly created extrusion of edges and we can collapse them down to a single point. So what we want to do is hit U on the keyboard, and notice for C we have collapse. So if we hit C, that will take those edges and collapse them down into one point. So if we go to point mode and we select that center point, right click and choose the bevel tool, and yes, you can bevel points. So we'll click and drag to the right, and notice now that we have a perfect round cylindrical hole. So we'll go into polygon mode, and we need to delete these 3 polygons on the inside. So we'll delete them, we'll turn the hypernurb on, and there is our perfect round hole in the side of the cube, and we didn't even have to use a bool to do it. So we'll go back to edge mode, and I'm going to use the loop selection again to select that boundary loop. So we need to make an extrusion off of these edges here that we've selected. So usually when you want to extrude, what you do is just right click and choose the extrude tool. However, in this case, since we're using R13, I've noticed that there's a quicker way to extrude. So if we just grab the move tool to get the axis handle back, we can hold down Control, and while holding down Control you can click and drag in the direction you want to go, and it will extrude that edge or polygon for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this newly extruded round cylindrical hole here, and I'm just going to bring that out to maybe about there. So now we'll check it, and we'll turn the hypernurb on. Alright, so that looks good. However, it's looking too much like a square there, kind of like a rounded square. So we need to address that, and that's a very quick and easy fix. We just need to use the knife tool in loop mode. And what we'll do is we'll make a loop cut right about there on that extrusion. Turn the hypernurb back on, and now everything looks round the way it should. Okay, so now we need to tackle the idea of a T-junction, which means that there's going to be another pipe the same size coming out of this pipe but at a 90-degree angle, and it's going to be going in this direction here. Now again, a lot of people like to use bools when they do this, but like I said, we're not going to be touching the bool in this series. We're going to learn how to model this correctly. So I'm going to go to a top view, and I'm going to change the shading here. So I'm just going to change this to ground shading. Okay, so we'll turn the hypernurb off. Alright, so I'm going to take the knife tool and I'm going to change the mode to line. And I'm going to disable visible only, because when I make this cut, I want it to go through the entire object. So what we want to do is we want to start a cut right here on this top center edge that's going across here that's highlighted. And I want to start the cut, but I want to go off at a 45-degree angle. Now notice over here for the knife tool that it's constrained to 45-degree increments. So if we were to click the edge here, and hold down the mouse button to click, and then hold down Shift and drag upward, you can see we have a highlight line for the knife tool. And if we start to drag this around, notice how it is snapping to 45-degree increments. So we'll take that to a 45-degree increment in this direction, and then we'll just let go, and that will make that cut for us. We need to come back here to the starting point again and click it, hold down Shift, make a 45-degree cut over in this direction, and then release it to make that cut. Now I want to go back to a perspective view, and I just want to check to make sure that we did cut all the way through to the bottom, which we did. Now notice what we have here if we look at this from a straight facing angle here. Notice how we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 edges there, and notice what they look like. That is a round 8-sided circle, just like we made in the side of the cube. So now we can take the polygons that are inside, and we can take those and delete them. Go into edge mode, use the loop selection to select that boundary loop of edges there. Grab the move tool, hold down Control, and then extrude outward to make that extrusion. Now if we turn the hypernurb on, we're going to have a little bit of trouble here. So what we'll do is we'll go back and we need to address this issue here on the end, because this needs to be straight like this end over here. So the way to do this is to just straighten these out on the Z axis. So in order to do that, for the Z, we'll come down here to the size. And for size for Z, it's at 70. So if we take this and zero that out and hit enter, now we've straightened out that edge. So we'll turn the hypernurb back on, and now that is nice and round like the other end over here. So now the issue is this T-junction here. So this can be addressed the same way as we addressed the issue with the round cylinder pipe here connecting to the Q. We just need to make some loop cuts in order to tighten that up. So we'll grab the knife tool, we'll go to loop mode, and we'll just make a loop cut right here on the inside, about right there. Turn the hypernurb back on, and there we go. Now if you want to make this tighter and sharpen this cut up around the area where these two pipes come together, you'll need to make some cuts. And if we try to make a manual cut, you can see the knife tool is doing some weird things, and that's not really going to work. So let's try going to a top view here, and let's go get the knife tool, and we'll go to line mode, and we'll go to maybe here, hold down the mouse button, hold down shift, and take that off into that direction for a 45-degree cut. And then we'll do the same over here on this side. So you can see that now that has tightened that up quite a bit. I actually think it looks better the way we originally had it, right there like that. Actually gives the appearance of perhaps some type of thick weld that would be there where that T-junction is at. Alright, so now we just need to close in these outside parts here, and that's very simple to do. All we need to do is go into edge mode, grab the loop selection again, select that outside boundary. We need to do a 0 extrusion, so just make sure the offset for the extrude tool is set to 0. Hit apply, use the scale tool. We'll just scale that in. Grab the move tool, hold down control, and extrude inward. Now notice that now we have another issue that we're running into on the end. And the reason for this is because the hypernurb is trying to subdivide and round those edges, and there's not enough control edges in order to help keep it nice and tight. So the way to fix that is just to grab the knife tool again in loop mode, and we need to make some loop cuts. So what we need to do is I'm just going to go to a top view. Now notice here, since we're in loop mode, if we try to make a loop cut here towards the edge, it's not straight. And the reason for that is because it's trying to vary between the two opposing edges. This right edge over here is nice and straight. You can see it's perfectly straight. But this edge over here goes down at an angle, and then it just stops. So what we need to do is we need to change the mode over to line and be sure that visible only is turned off. And then we just need to hold down shift and then click and drag to make a vertical cut there. Now we also need to come over here to this point here, and we just need to clean this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click it, hold down shift, and then drag down. That way we don't have a point that just kind of stops there. It continues over and down through the rest of the cylinder. Alright, now notice that also by making that cut over here, now the edge here is starting to look a little better. So we'll take the knife tool back to loop mode again, and we'll just make one cut here in the middle of this outside lip. Now you could make two cuts, one close to each one of the outside and inside edges if you like. I'm just going to make one right in the center, turn the hypernurb back on, and now we have tightened that up, and I think that looks pretty good. So we just need to do the same thing to this one over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the manual cut in line mode across there. loop selection tool, select that outside loop. Now we'll grab the extrude tool, do a 0 extrusion. And just to be a little different, I'm going to take this one and bring it in a little further. Grab the move tool, hold down Control, and extrude that inward. So we'll go back to the knife tool in loop mode, and we'll make a loop cut about there, and maybe one about there. And why not, let's make one up here as well. Alright, so there is our pipe with a T-junction coming off of a cube. So just to recap what we've done here, we've taken a cube and we've knocked out a perfectly round cylindrical hole in the side of it. We extruded that out, and then from the side of that pipe, we extruded another perfectly round cylindrical pipe coming off the side to create the T-junction. Alright, so I think that wraps up this part. So again, thank you for watching.